Everybody can see this? Sounds good. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. I think I know most everybody. I'm going to skip the introductions. I know that usually happens because I think we have a lot of content and maybe discussion. So, and besides, you see each other's names on there. My name is Tony Villanueva. Like I said, I know most of you. Some of you may not know or may not know me. I teach psychology at Palo Alto College, and the topic is implicit bias, and the title is "We Are All Biased." Okay, so let's get started with this. So what is bias? I'll begin with this question. You know, everyone is biased. True or false? What do you say? True or false?
True.
You can nod. True. I mean, I think everybody says, yeah. Of course, we're biased. And here's the real question: are you biased? Are you biased? I mean, if you say no, it would be a contradiction after you said everyone is, right? But it's an interesting question to ask. Are you biased? Because it kind of forces you to ask, you know, in what way are you biased, right? In what way are you biased? And are you aware of your biases? And this is where this idea of implicit bias comes in, because the implicit bias is a term that's not that old, but it became very popular, especially after the 2016 presidential debate when the moderator asked Hillary Clinton, "Are police implicitly biased against people?" The researchers in implicit bias just like, whoa, it's all over, great, this is good news. And then like, oh no, they're going to misuse it. They're not going to understand what it is. And sure enough, it just got exploded. Now everybody's talking about implicit bias and, you know, and they're asking, what is it anyway? You know, and some people get offended. I'm not biased, you know. Many law enforcement programs throughout the country require implicit bias training.
Tony, are you going through your slides?
Oh, yes, I am. Are you not seeing them?
I'm just seeing the first slide.
Me
I don't know
too.
about everybody else.
Me too. I just see the first one.
It's probably doing that thing where when you share, it's not sharing the whole screen. It's just sharing the initial thing that you opened with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow. I do that all the time in class. My students have to tell me.
So, like, why, right? Let me see if I can do this. It says share screen. There it is, right? Or do you see it there?
Well, I see it again, but it's just a first screen.
It looks like the third slide, actually. Yeah, I think you can go through them now. Try the slideshow.
You see that?
Yeah, I can see you moving through them.
Okay. Are you seeing the ones on the side or just the large one?
I see the ones on the slide and the large one. Like it's in just like PowerPoint mode as opposed to the screen.
I see. So
the slideshow.
What is that doing?
If you take it out of presenter mode, we'll be able to see the slideshow.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Actually, it's not in presenter mode.
No, it's not.
Let's see. Do you see the slides? Are they moving?
No.
Oh. Are you seeing anything? Same. Okay, let me try this again.
Click on the share screen that's up in the upper left-hand corner when you do the share screen.
Okay. Let's see. Share screen, upper. It's a whiteboard screen. That would be it.
Okay, but now you should be able to switch.
Let's see.
Maybe not. It's always in the upper left-hand corner on mine.
Yeah. Do you see, what do you see, a screen there that has the...
Whiteboard.
Oh, yeah, that's not it. So let me do this.
Maybe start the presentation and then screen share. Is it in presentation mode?
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Maybe it is. This should be it. I mean, this is a screen that has, I mean, It's right on there. Are you seeing anything move?
We can see it. We can see it, Tony, but you're just going to have to move through the slides manually.
Okay, that's fine. And you see the slides on the left side too?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna keep it that way. Just
Yeah.
to get to this. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, I think I stopped here. What is bias? Everyone is biased, true or false? Are you biased? This is where I stopped. Many law enforcement programs throughout the country require implicit bias training. 28,000 in the Department of Justice. So it's well known, and people, talk about it and have to go through training. It does have its controversy. We can talk about that in a few minutes, but it's in the news all over. What is bias? Let's start with this term. What is bias? This is a very simple idea, right? It's a tendency to prefer. It's a preference, one person or thing to another, and to favor that person or thing. Again, we all have preferences, right? People, objects. Some preferences are overt and conscious. Some may not be apparent to us, right? This is where it gets kind of tricky because it can be offensive. How dare you tell me that I have a bias? How do you know? And I'll give you an example. Right? When my kids were small, I have a little boy, little girl. My wife said, "You're spending more time with your son than with your daughter." And I'm like, how? That's terrible. Are you suggesting that I love my son more than my daughter? She's like, no, you're just doing that. Did I have a bias there? If I were honest with myself, yes, but she had to point it out. And that's true for a lot of these unconscious biases. It's really hard for us to know that we have them until somebody else points them out. And you have to go through like several phases of denial and, getting angry. It's like a loss, right? Oh my gosh, what happened to me? What do you think? You have any thoughts about this? Do you feel you harbor unconscious biases?
Tony,
Yes.
when I go to the doctor, I expect to see a male. And then when they ask me, do you want to see a nurse, I expect to see a woman. So that's kind of a bias right there, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. But, you're aware of it. It's interesting. But, yeah, of course, it could have been unconscious at the time, and maybe now you're aware. So you're, it may not mean much, right? Because, okay, so what? I have this bias. Does that mean, there's anything wrong with it? Only if you're doing something with it, like acting on it or making decisions based on this bias. But you kind of hit at the first step. You became aware. That's important. So here's the implicit bias definition. Attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions. And the important part is in an unconscious manner. Okay, that's crucial. Like we're not aware of it. So when I ask you, do you have an unconscious bias? Like you could have told me, like, how am I supposed to know it's unconscious, right? But over time you may have realized, like, you know what? 5 years ago I didn't know this. Now I know. So we can become aware of our unconscious biases when people point them out, or when going through this process, I may point out some types of unconscious biases. You say, yeah, I get it. That's me. Or, you'll see. I'll give you a few examples. So thought processes that happen without you knowing about it. So I mentioned stereotypes because at the root of the implicit bias is a stereotype. In fact, unconscious bias, implicit biases are the same as unconscious stereotypes. They're basically stereotypes that are, you're not aware of. And there's a definition of a stereotype. And you're familiar with the word stereotype, okay? I think we all use them all the time. Asians are, and you can fill in the blank, don't say it out loud. Texans are, you can do that. I don't know what's a stereotype for Texans?
My Wisconsin boyfriend tells me we all have big egos.
Big egos.
Cowboys.
Cowboys, all that stuff. There's plenty of them. Americans.
Texan first, American second.
There's no bias. There's no bias there, Matilda. What's your point? I'm kidding. Americans are, men are. Don't go there. Jews are. They can be positive or negative. At the root of each stereotype are associated. The thing about the stereotype is they can be wrong. When you apply this to all members of that group, you could miss the boat. It's like, no, I don't fix cars. At the root of each stereotype are associations that we have adopted. Where do they come from? What kind of associations and where do they come from? Well, here's some simple ones. Associations that we make are mostly automatic, like peanut butter and, somebody answer this one.
Jam.
Bananas.
Bananas, yeah. I'm going to age myself with this one. By the way, it's peanut butter and jelly. Saturday morning what?
Cartoons.
Yeah, for people who are like older than, I don't know. Anyway, Saturday morning. Pumpkin, straight out of Thanksgiving. Pumpkin pie. Yeah. So most associations are benign, right? I mean, big deal, right? That we connect one with the other. Associations can be negative, oversimplified, or outright incorrect. Again, this is the basis of the stereotype. It's an association made about a person that belongs into that group that may be oversimplified. Okay, look through the pictures and what's at the end? Make out that word at the end.
Carrier.
There you go. It's a simple one. Just throw out those three letters and you kind of fill in the blank. It's terrier. Straightforward. Okay, fill it. Same thing. What's the word at the end?
Terrorist.
Right.
I was going to say Turan, but they don't spell Turan.
Yeah.
H.
Yeah. But you know what immediate association kicks in, right? And why? Because are you racist? Or is it because that's just an association that's been put in your head by the media, by conversations? That's the question that people ask. Wow, if I'm harboring these thoughts, what does that say about me? And the point that I want to convey is that it doesn't say that you're a racist. It says that you have associations that may be either incorrect or unfair, but it's the acting on it that could make it racist. But as far as these associations, I mean, we all have them. Why? Because we live in this country and we watch TV and they just kind of fall in your brain and you can't help it, like peanut butter and jelly, okay? So there are many forms of stereotypes. There's, some associated with race, ethnicity, religion, geography, gender preference, income, class. Again, we can go down the list and spend a lot of time on all the different stereotypes. And I mean, some of them are funny, cute, but some of them are flat out offensive, as you know. And they come from just breathing the air that we breathe in this country. They're all over. So today, most people will not admit to holding negative stereotypes. You ask them, are you racist? Do you have negative views about women? They're not going to say, yeah, it's not socially acceptable. So they don't do that. Or they may not even be aware that they harbor negative stereotypes. This is the unconscious bias, unconscious stereotype, also called implicit bias. What's the evidence that there is implicit bias out there? Or just that there is bias, period. These are studies that have been done, and you can do these studies today and get the same results. And I did what I'm not supposed to do. I should have referenced all of these studies, but if you want the information on these studies, I can get that. But fairly straightforward information. White applicants get about 50% more callbacks than black applicants with the same resume. Is that a surprise to anybody?
No, I was just telling a colleague the other day in my department, been there for 15 years. We've never had a Black full-time English faculty member. The only time we did, I think the answer I got was in the early 90s. So, you know, serving on hiring committees, I see this happen a lot of the time. And sometimes it's just a name on an application or a resume that sets off signals in people's brains where they start making associations or assumptions about the applicants, again, just based on name. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment?
What is the applicant pool, though? I mean, that's one of the things we see in IT is that there's not that many women in certain positions. However, there are not that many women in the field. So we've got to get the number of women in the field up before we can get the number of women into senior positions up or into education up, because there's just not that many women there. So if you look at the percentage of people in the industry and then you look at the percentage of the faculty, then we have probably a higher percentage of women faculty that are in the overall field. So
Yeah, no, and that when you kind of add all the variables, it kind of complicates the situation. To kind of make this clear that the bias exists, they make all things equal in the study. Let's just make all things equal. Same resume, same pool, you know, number of people in the pool. Given all that, and the only difference is, you know, black or white, you get this kind of a response. Now, does that mean you individually? It's a pattern that you see. It's kind of hard to say you are the one who's going to do this just because you're white. You can do this. It just says it exists out there, and from a probability basis, there's that likelihood that people will, you know, white people, even African Americans, may select the white applicant or the African American with the same resume. You know, why this? Even a black person? Yes, even a black person. Something called internalized racism. I mean, we may have internalized the standards and stereotypes of society and behave based on that, even if you're a minority. College professors are 26% more likely to respond to a student's email when it is signed by Brad rather than Lamar. The perception that it's the name of a black student versus a white student, that's enough to trigger this kind of bias that if you ask people, would you do that? They would, not me. But it's there, you know, when they're not given all the information, when they're not aware that they're part of a study. This is how people behave. Physicians recommend less pain medication for black patients than white patients with the same injury. What's the suggestion? That black patients feel less pain. Now, this is interesting. There's a research where doctors are asked, do you feel that African Americans experience less pain than white people? Some, in this one study at least, the responses were overt, and people said yes. So it's not even an unconscious bias. It's in some cases, and these are medical students, by the way, who were asked. So this line between the unconscious and the conscious is pretty interesting. You know, if you put the same folks in a different context, they may say no. You know, a lot of times the context, the situation will determine what you're going to admit to versus not.
Tony, you know, to go on that, during the elections, you know, I always hear about when they describe Kamala Harris and Stacey Abrams, they're strong black women. But when they describe other, you know, people in office that are females that are not African American, they don't use the word strong. It seems like strong and black were somehow associated with those two individuals, but less so with other people.
Either that or they're using strong because there is an implicit bias that they associate with black that they're trying to compensate for, you know?
That's insightful. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know McCain's wife was ever described as a strong woman.
Isn't that interesting? I'm kind of reflecting on that, Ron.
It's also interesting that when you see things written up, they always describe people as a black person, but they never say they're a white person.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an implicit bias there, because race shouldn't make any difference if somebody's doing the job.
Yeah. 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 That's so interesting. Yeah, and yeah, it's just interesting.
They always give the men's age and never the women's a lot of times.
Yeah, you find that in the newspaper a lot too. When you read, you see the number, right, of the age next to the person. And yeah, I gotta check that. I may have that bias. I don't even know it myself. Again, if you confront folks, say, "Why'd you do that?" Then they probably say, "Well, I didn't mean anything by it." Of course, right? So in this study, which is pretty interesting, they asked people to give a price. How much would they pay for an iPod back in 2013 when iPods were a thing? And the only difference, you see the difference, right, is the color of the skin, right? On average, you get this difference in how much they were offering. Again, the only difference is the color of the skin. Does that demonstrate some kind of this systematic bias? It's pretty straightforward, right? There it is. Okay, so I'm going to show a video. Let's see. Let's hope this goes well. It's fairly short. You might remember John Quinones. What would you do? This is a 3-minute video. Can you see the video screen?
Yes.
You see this?
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And you wonder, did he lose his keys, or is he blatantly stealing that bike? In broad daylight, he hammers, and then saws on the chain. When that doesn't work, he pulls out an industrial-sized bolt cutter, and when he's asked, he messes up.
You lost the lock?
No, not exactly. But he's not a real thief. Justin Kelly is an actor, and our hidden cameras are rolling.
What happened?
Nothing. I can't get through the lock. I mean, I know it's weird, but you wouldn't happen to know whose bike this is.
No.
Good.
It was odd that somebody had all that equipment, but you didn't do anything.
No?
That's true.
That's the bottom line.
Lots of people stopped and scared. A few even questioned the actor.
Okay, he's basically stealing the bike, okay? He's got the tools, he's got everything in there. And he's even telling them, it's not mine.
You have to ask. Is that your bike?
I guess technically no. Okay. Bye.
Good luck.
In over an hour, about 100 people passed by. Only George and Arlene tried to stop him. Some tell us they plan to call the police later. Others say they're scared. Keep moving. This woman and her friends give our thief the benefit of the doubt. When we ask why, Lisa Washington tells us first impressions matter.
I remember thinking, young white men don't usually carry burglar tools.
So we all make assumptions, huh?
I'm thinking maybe he works for the park.
We replace our white thief with this young man, Madlock. Remember, both actors dress in a similar way and are about the same age.
Is that your bike?
Nah.
What are you cut the chain for?
Right away, somebody yelled. Well, within seconds, another person confronts our thief.
Is that your bike?
Technically it's not, but it's going to be mine.
More people convert.
Are you calling the police?
Are you taking me inside? That's your bike?
No, it's not, sir.
Oh, why are you doing that?
Is this any y'all bike?
Okay, I'm going to challenge you. Would you be in that crowd calling or making that association? He's probably stealing it versus the other person who is doing the same thing. Would you have had a different response to the white person? I don't need a response. I just want you to check your own preferences, your own biases.
It's Is this your bike?
No, it's a move. Well, not to you. And sure enough, one man whips out a cell phone to call 911. There's someone to take care of bike here. Our actor triggers more reaction. Some people are even snapping pictures for evidence.
So, let's just say they had the association in their mind, it was triggered. That alone doesn't necessarily make it a racist behavior. It's when they start doing this, the behavior, the phone calls, the harassment. Now we're talking, it's a whole different level now, right?
Once everyone moves away, we reset our cameras. And within minutes, another outraged man is yelling. Are you trying to steal that bike?
Excuse me, sir, but the bike's been here for days. Like, no one's going to take it.
Well, that's not your bike then.
Yeah,
You can't just come in and take something from somebody.
excuse me, sir.
Okay, I'll just take your tools later. You sure?
Please, sir, don't touch my stuff, sir. Please, sir, do not touch my stuff. Please. Yeah, all right, but this has been here. Like, who's gonna take it?
Well, that doesn't make it your property.
Technically, it does.
No, it doesn't technically. It's not yours.
All right, sir.
When we bring out our cameras, David Robb wants us to go after the thief. That kid in the red shirt.
Packing away at a bike that's not his.
And you guys are right to take it. She may not look like your average bike thief, but actress Ashley Carpenter makes sure anyone who asks knows she's up to no good.
You don't know who this is, dude.
Need a hand. They're going to help her steal, okay?
With a little help from Ed Fitzsimmons, the bike chain easily falls away.
Oh my God.
And he isn't the only man who stops in his tracks. What's this guy thinking?
You know, you pull up, you don't know if she wants her key, if she's trying to actually take the bike, but then again, she's a girl.
Girls doing steal?
You never know. Most of the time, the guy's going to do something like that.
Reginald pedals right past his appalled wife, straight to our actress, asking her if she needs a hand.
Okay, I'll eventually get it.
I can find the rollway. I can steal it.
Did you hear that?
You can steal it? You can help me steal it.
Okay. What do you think? Give me some thoughts.
Tony, did the first guy and the female admit that they were stealing the bike though? Because I thought they didn't allude to that, and the man in the middle did say he was stealing it.
As close as you can say, I'm taking it. It's not mine.
Yeah,
So,
the girl, nobody asked her. Everybody assumed it was her bike.
Yeah, or even if it wasn't, they just. Well, yeah, I think they assumed it was her bike.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even ask. Yeah, you're right.
Ask.
Yeah.
One of the guys did tell the girl, one of the guys who was riding his bike and saw her, he stopped and he said, if you need help with that, I also know how to steal. He said, I know how to steal bikes. I can help you. So
He kind of knew that she
he
was.
knew what was going on, that she was stealing the bike. And to answer your question, Ron, yeah, they all said the same thing. They were all given the same script. I've seen this video before.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment? Of course, none of you would do anything like this. None of you would be on the side of, questioning the black kid, right? None of you would let that white lady get by without asking, are you stealing? Right? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I would do. To be honest with you, I don't know what I would have done. It's like until you're confronted, right, by the situation. The circumstances matter. The situation matters, until you're there, we're not sure what we would do. And you can ask folks, what would you do? And that's the whole premise of the John Quinones show. What would you do? Because what he does, he goes after them and says, why did you do that? They can't answer. I don't know. I'm not sure. You can even ask people beforehand, what would you do in this situation? and then set up a scenario like days after, weeks out later, and they fall right into it. And you can say, you said this before. Why did you do this? And they're kind of stuck. Are they bad people? No.
You know, for me, Tony, I mean, one of those videos, I mean, the question, what would you do? It's valuable to reflect on. And for me, it prompts a question that's different but related, of course. What should you do? And so I remember using those sorts of videos in ethics classes. And to me, it was helpful in just taking it to a different level, you know, and just helping shine the light on that implicit bias that we all have, you know, based on our...
That's a good point, John, because I think I guess the initial task would be to make people aware, which is a very important first step. But once they become aware, you know, the next question is, what should I do? What's the right response? And I'm sure that, you know, yields a lot of discussion, because I think there's, you know, it depends. You always hear it depends. You know? Well, the person that looks like threatening, I'm not going to do anything because he might hurt me, right? Or I may call the cops. Well, maybe I shouldn't call the cops because I don't have all the evidence, right? So I think that is a good question. And I'll ask that question again as we move forward, because you're posing the question we need to ask ourselves as it pertains to students, for example. If you have the implicit bias or you're not even aware of it, what should we do, right? What should we do? Because do you think they exist at Palo Alto, these biases towards students? Well, of course not, right? Of course not. No, of course. I mean, I'm kidding. Have we reflected on it? Should we reflect on it? And then what should we do, right? I mean, those are the important questions, aren't they? So let me go back to my screen and do this.
I don't know if you're asking a rhetorical question, but I think the first thing that we could do is be honest and admit it when we are guilty of having an implicit bias. It's hard to do. It makes us vulnerable. There's fear of being judged or shamed, but I think we've all agreed that we all acknowledge that we do have implicit biases. So I think being able to first admit it is a small action that we can start doing.
You know, Matilda, that's a very important point. The fact that we're admitting to having implicit bias is actually a big step that we've taken as a society. Because you go back 20 years ago and you ask people, do you have implicit bias? You know, in other words, are you aware of your behavior? Do you know why you do what you do? Most people would have said, of course, I'm in charge of my behavior. I'm in charge of my attitudes. I know what I'm doing. Well, is it possible that you may not know why you do what you do? People would get offended with that question. Like, how dare you suggest that I don't know why I do what I do? It took years to get people to realize, I'm not always the master of my destiny, which seems like common sense, you know. But it wasn't common sense until recently. It's like, well, of course, you know, there are thoughts lurking beneath my awareness. Again, you know, it's a big step that we've made over the last few years. They are unconscious and automatic. We all have them. We may have a hard time admitting that we have them because it goes against who we think we are or who we want to be. There's that dissonance, cognitive dissonance. My behavior and my attitude, my thoughts are not consistent, and I don't like it. So I'm going to find a way to, you know, align them. And so, but people just kind of, once they realize, they're like, wow, I didn't know I had these biases. Like when I was told that I prefer my son over my daughter, ouch. I had to figure out a way to align that, you know, like I didn't like that. Didn't feel good. So it motivated me to change my behavior, you know. And just because you hold these biases does not mean you're a racist, right? It doesn't. There is a narrative that says, we're all racist. And that there's something to that in the sense that we're all kind of breathe the same air. These associations exist. We have them. Question is, do we act on them? That's where you get into this. Are you a racist? The other part that says that we're all racist, it may be connected to the idea that we know racism exists, but we're not doing anything to change it. That's the other narrative. We should all be anti-racist and act on, this principle that we should fight it. So just keep in mind that once you hear that, you have implicit biases, that's not saying you are a racist person. It just means you have those associations, right? Okay. How much time do we have? Just briefly, I wanted to kind of make the connection between the stereotypes and racism. The term stereotype is where we connect implicit bias, because like I mentioned, implicit bias would be an unconscious stereotype. If you follow it to the right, it's a thought. In this case, it's an unconscious thought. Laker fans are arrogant and obnoxious. You may just see the Laker sign and have this unconscious feeling, even though you're not sure why. You don't have a good feeling about the Lakers for whatever reason, because you're a Spurs fan. Prejudice is more of a feeling about people, positive and negative. I hate Lakers fans. They make me angry. And then discrimination is the behavior, positive or negative treatment of others. I would never hire a Lakers fan. So it's important to kind of make that distinction, because we kind of go from one to the other and use them interchangeably, and they're not. They're not. So if you look down below, racism is a combination of the prejudice and discrimination against the individual based solely on one's membership in a specific racial group. Notice it doesn't point to the stereotype. The stereotype is that those associations, it's when you act on it or exhibit behavior that says, ugh, I don't want to be around you. Your affects show. You frown, you look at people and you like, sneer or whatever. There's other forms of bias. There's so many. We can go over all these. I'll just mention a few. Besides implicit biases, we have many others, hidden biases that may affect our judgment, decision making. Blah. Okay, attribution bias. Judging others on their actions, but judging ourselves based on our intentions. I'll give you a good one. Most of you are faculty. You're teaching your class and somebody walks in late. Your initial thought may be, what an irresponsible student.
Mm-hmm. Flip
that around. You walk in late and you say, well, of course, traffic. So to what do you attribute the behavior? The bias may be that if it's somebody else, a student, it's them, their disposition, their character. The person is bad. They're irresponsible. But if it's me doing it, it's not the disposition, it's the situation. I'm late because, oh my God, traffic was so bad, or I had to take care of this first. This was so important. Do we do that as faculty? Do we, fall into what they call the fundamental attribution error? I can tell you when I'm in my faculty senate meetings, I see the double standard of people on the phone, faculty, while I'm talking. Yet they go around and say, students should not be. Now, I don't know, maybe there's justification for that because, we're faculty. Anyway, confirmatory bias, seeking out evidence that confirms our initial perceptions and ignoring contrary information. We do that a lot, right? Whatever confirms our initial beliefs. If you believe that somebody's a bad person, you're not looking for good behavior. You're looking for things to confirm your initial bias. Look at him. Look at that. He made a joke. That was cruel. As opposed to, he made a joke. That was funny. Depending on what your initial perception of the person, you'll be looking for information to confirm your initial thought. Again, we do a lot of that. Blind spot bias. You may have been victim of this, like now. bias that allows us to see bias in others, but not in yourselves or ourselves. I'm not biased. Of course not. The tendency to think everything about a person is good because our first impression of them was good. An attractive person always, I'm sorry, not always, a lot of times gets this halo effect bias. They're attractive, therefore they must be good. Do you think there was a halo bias on the female at the end of the video?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. You know what would be interesting too, though, in that video is if they used a woman who looked differently. So maybe a woman of color. That was a white blonde girl.
Yeah, that would be interesting. They do variations like that. I mean, that's part of the research. Like, let's use all combinations and see what patterns emerge. And there's like a hierarchy of male versus female, minority versus non-minority, and then of course the audience matters too. The situation matters. There's so many variations that you can kind of, but the pattern does hold though. You can kind of move things around. The African American, white. That's kind of happens a lot, and it's you can vary the situations quite a bit, and it holds. But there are some circumstances where you may see white people who are like not biased and not, calling him out. Remember, not everybody who walked by did something, they didn't necessarily either hold the bias or do something about the bias. Some maybe didn't even think anything of it. So I mean, I don't want to say this is everybody. This is just a pattern that we see. Stereotype threat is an interesting one. Fear of confirming a negative stereotype about yourself. You feel that there's a stereotype. It's about people in your group, and that's enough to make you feel like, geez, I don't want to make this come true. It creates a anxiety, fear. If you hold this stereotype that Hispanics don't do well in college, you're part of that group. That alone can cause anxiety to say, oh my gosh, I'm in college. I'm going to screw up. I'm going to screw up. I'm going to screw up. And it does affect your performance. That anxiety alone is enough to make you feel like, oh my gosh, I think I will screw up and people will perform. This test was done with initially with women, and they used the stereotype would be that women don't do well in math because a lot of women hold that idea. So they asked women to take a test, and a math test, math problems, and they asked them to kind of fill out the name at the top, name and what was it? I think for grade level, and that was it. And they, took the test and got the results. So same group, weeks later, take almost the same, similar test. Give me your name, and this time put your gender at the top. Took the test. On average, they performed lower when they had to identify their gender. And you can do this with gender and race. The implication would be that it's triggered this stereotype that says women don't perform well in math tests, and that created that anxiety. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm a woman, therefore I probably won't do well. They call that stereotype threat. They do that with African Americans. They can test it with different groups, and it could be even a personal experience. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not going to do well. So that's an interesting bias that we may have.
Something similar to that is there was a study done on elementary school teachers when they asked their children and students in the class, in the math class, teachers tend to give the harder math problems or ask for the answers to harder math problems to boys. And if they did ask a female for the answer to a more difficult math question, they would not wait as long for the response.
Yeah. Wow. I would say if we were to delve into anything as a faculty, I would say we should look at our biases as we relate to students. And it would be a very hard conversation to have, but a necessary one, because I mean, frankly, I almost feel like I don't have any bias. I know I do, but I'm fooling myself. I just don't feel it. Somebody's gonna have to call me out on it. And I don't know you, but I've been called out in the past in the classroom. Very uncomfortable. But to have that honest conversation among faculty, I think would be such an important exercise. Go ahead, Ron.
I see it with financial aid. When I see a white person, I assume that they're not on financial aid, but a non-white, I assume that they are on financial aid. And I'm caught that, so I have to make sure I ask everybody, just to be fair to everybody, if they are on financial aid when we discuss it.
There are times that I dress down when I go to work, and I go to the business. What do you call it? Either financial, not the financial aid office, but some of those other places. Or the registrar, or what do you call that area?
Like admissions?
Admissions, yeah. I like to drop or add students. And I've had interesting experiences when I'm dressed down. Like, what do you want? Who are you? But if they know that I'm faculty, I get a whole different experience. And then sometimes they're even surprised. Like, somebody will say, "Oh, he's faculty." "Oh, I'm sorry, sir." Yikes. Local biases. San Antonio, which part of town? Do you think we hold any of those biases? North side, south side,
Yes.
west side, east side? School that you attended?
Yeah.
Place of work, nonprofit, education, private sector. How about at the colleges? What are our biases within the college? Faculty, staff? Adjunct, full-time?
Yes.
College, district? And then bias towards students. I have some questions that, we have a few minutes. I was going to show you another video, but I don't know if I should. I'm running out of time. What implicit biases might we hold toward our students? Wanted to get some feedback from you. Certainly not you. What biases do other people have?
I think a common one that I see, and I'm certainly guilty of this as well, and I'm consistently trying to work on it, and that is dealing with our student population whose first language is not English. And I think the assumption that is made is that the language barrier is due to lack of intelligence or brightness. But really, as I said, it's a language barrier. So I think sometimes when we hear our students speak and it's very clear that their first language is not English, then the other assumption that is made is their intellectual abilities are not as sharp as our English-speaking students, if that makes sense, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think it makes sense. When I went to school, I did not go to school with Anglo-Saxons, only Mexicans. And when it came time for me to go to school, because we had to go to school with the Anglos, I was very surprised that they really were not as smart as I thought in English, and that a lot of the Mexican Americans were even smarter. And I never understood why, because hey, they're English speakers, this is their language, why aren't they brighter than us? So to me, that was an awakening right there. So I think it kind of relates to what you're saying.
Yeah. What if I write this down? What comes to mind? You don't have to answer it, but falling asleep. Irresponsible student?
They're working at night, or they're working during the day.
Exactly.
What other possible explanations? Sleep apnea?
Narcolepsy?
Medication?
Bored?
Medications? But no, not bored. Not my class.
Partied all night. They're a college student. They stayed up late partying.
Yeah, that's a negative one there. True. Disruptive. What's the initial?
ADHD.
There you go. What else?
Needs attention.
Medications?
Yeah, off the meds.
Off the meds?
PTSD.
PTSD. Frequently absent. Irresponsible?
Irresponsible.
It depends. I ask my students to tell me if they're going to be absent, and if they have a continuing series of absences without ever contacting me, then I think them as irresponsible. If they're frequently absent because they had COVID and they're missing their work, but they let me know about it, then I'm willing to cut them all the slack in the world. It's a matter of communication.
Let's talk about Zoom. Not wanting to show their face on the screen, because some people suggest we should make it a requirement.
We do have it as a requirement for our high school students.
What could be wrong with making it a requirement?
Someone could be living in the car or a homeless shelter and they don't want people to see it.
There could be fighting happening at home, abuse. They could be ashamed of their room. There could be many computers at one time, and so they don't have the bandwidth.
That's why I think we oversimplify the magic of communication, of just, I'm sorry, not oversimplify, but we minimize it. If we just ask the student, if we just ask the person if they're stealing a bike, if we just simply ask, then we don't have to make assumptions. And then with assumptions come implicit biases. And so, for example, I just asked my student, why don't you ever have your camera on? And I was really stunned, but also pleased with his honesty. And he said, it's because this isn't the time I normally shower. I shower right before I go to work, and your class is hours before I go to work. And I don't want to be on camera if I haven't showered yet. But just me asking him that question revealed so much information about this student to me in a bunch of different areas.
That's a good point, Matilda. But do you think that before we even go there, we have to work through our bias that they're not even going to tell us the truth in the first place? Do you think faculty may hold that bias that, of course, you're going to come up with an answer? That's
pretty, I don't know, man. That's pretty cynical. I don't know. I don't think, if I ask them, they're going to lie. I just believe what they tell me.
Quite honestly, I think that's, if I'm honest with myself, that's the first reflex that I have.
It's like the kid who tells you his grandmother died 6 times.
Yeah.
You're biased.
It is a bias. Of course it's a bias. I just made it conscious.
Well, Tony, it's required to have a camera on in my class, so students would just do this.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
I can see the top of their head.
I'm okay with that.
And I think that's important, Ron, that to be able to share those, ideas like that, because, if we make it a requirement, I think we need to kind of address the reasons why some wouldn't, and if we don't, we're only going to make them feel very uncomfortable, insecure, and basically saying, then Zoom is not for you, but if we give them options, call me if there's issues with the video, call me and let me know, whatever, give them options. I think we're saying you're welcome to come to school, and Zoom is for you too. The thing is, other people are going to question, like, why him and not me? And you can't go around saying, well, because so-and-so has, so you get into this fairness question, right?
We have students with Chromebooks, and they have been notoriously unreliable. The audio goes out, the video goes out, I've had one student had 3 different Chromebooks this semester from her school. She's a high school student, and she's almost never on camera because the dang camera doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. So we are 2:30. Okay, quickly. Here you go. Just questions to ponder. We don't have time to go over these, but things to consider. Is it important to check our biases? Why or why not? I think your answer is going to be yes. Are implicit biases detrimental to our students? I wish I could measure this and do a study. If so, how and to what extent? It would be hard to do this research, but I think it would be important. What should we do about our implicit biases, and what role do we play? I think we need to answer.
Would you also ask whether implicit biases were good for our students? Because if they're in college, I have a bias toward them improving themselves. They're making an attempt to do something good.
Yeah, I would say we hold positive unconscious biases, and I wouldn't worry about them because they're good. I worry about the bad ones that may lead to barriers. But yeah, I think it would be affirming to us to say, I would like to hear you, Linda, share your attitude about our students. And if it's positive, it may rub off on me. It's like, you know what? You're right. We need to work with them because they're like our future. I think it's important to share even our positive biases with each other. So that the last slide is where there's some resources. Some of you mentioned Blind Spot. Great read. Pretty straightforward, simple. They're the originators of the phrase implicit bias. There is an implicit bias test. If you want to take it, just Google implicit association test. Pretty popular. Millions have taken it. There's a lot of research behind the IAT suggesting that we may hold unconscious biases, and we do.
Is that the one about living close to a neighbor of color or something like that?
No, this one shows pictures or images, and you're supposed to respond quickly to the images associated with a word, either favorably or unfavorably. The trick behind this one is that if it's an association that you're not comfortable with, really what they're looking at is how quickly do you respond to like an image of a black male and successful. If your response is very slow compared to black male prison, you respond very quickly to that. But you see black male prison, if you slow down on that response, you're like, okay, there's probably, black male success. If you slow down, just the mere fact that you're having a hard time responding to that association may suggest that that's an uncomfortable or not a familiar association to you. Thus, you hold a bias. Now, some people argue that that's not appropriate because it doesn't really tell you much, but I think the suggestion is, for the most part, it probably does point to some kind of an association that we hold. So that's the IAT, and very popular, by the way. Okay, any questions? It's 3:30. I'm supposed to stop at, 2:30. Anybody have any questions or thoughts, ideas, suggestions, confessions, as Javier Aguirre would say, confessions? Any thoughts, ideas, comments?
Well, I appreciate you having this, Tony, and I'm reminded of the saying that's attributed to Socrates. I'm sure all heard it before. The unexamined life is not worth living, and to me, part of what you've done for me is just to help me to examine myself and my assumptions, and to ask, are those harmful to individuals or to the community at large? So I appreciate that, Tony. Thank you.
I think one of the challenges we have is to have confidence to be able to call somebody on their overt, behavior that may have an unconscious bias. That's and we see it. We see it in other people, but we don't want to call them on it. That's very tough. How can we begin to do that without offending people? And how can we have a receptive mind to say, "Oh, thank you for calling me out on my overgeneralization or judgment, error in judgment." Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Tony.
All right.
Thank you, Tony.
That's great.
I'm gonna say goodbye.
Thank
I'll
you.
stick around if anybody wants to chat a little bit, but thank you, everybody.
Trump. Georgia is set to recertify its results again today after a third count of ballots there. The Trump campaign requested this latest review